Hello, I'm Anthony the Pup Dundas, and you're listening to the weekly Dartscast, episode 174.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Weekly Dartscast, episode 174, and thank you to Anthony Dundas for the intro, the best 174 call in the game. And I'm Alex Moss, and joining me as always, darts statistician Burton DeWitt. How you doing?
Bit tense here as of since we're recording on Tuesday, election day in the US, but I'm doing okay. How are you, Alex?
I'm doing well, thank you, and best luck with that. And we're heading into what I'm calling non-stop November. We've got 22 days of darts in 25 days from the PDC starting on Friday with the World Cup. You're going to hear from two debutants in the field this weekend, Matt Campbell and Craig Galliano. Also going to hear from a player who unfortunately is not going to be able to take part this weekend, Harith Lim. But we'll start things off by looking back at the weekend at the European Championship. Another big title for Peter Wright, beating James Wade 11-4 in Sunday's final. And we'll come on to our question of the week. Lots of people getting involved in it. Where would you put Peter Wright in the GOAT conversation? Top 10 all time, top 10 PDC, or neither?
Well, I'm going to start with the top 10 all time, and I don't think he's there yet. Although if you do adjust for the fact the A level and the A game that players have today is much better than it was even half a generation ago. And if we talk about where his A game is, not relative to his competition, but relative to where anyone was at any given time, yeah, he probably is one of the 10 best in that regard. But you have to compare to different eras. And if players were playing at this standard 40 years ago, the players of 40 years ago would have, at least some of them would have upped their game to that level. So taking that into consideration, I don't think you can put him as one of the 10 best of all time. I think I put together a quick list of 12 that I would put ahead of him. I'm not going to read them all off, or maybe I will. But I found at least 12 that I would put in front of him, including obviously Taylor Van Gogh, Van Barneveld, Bristow, players that we've talked about on this show multiple times when we discuss who the top 5 are of all time. I think Gary Anderson's there as well. Then, you also throw in the two greatest ladies players of all time, Trina Gulliver and Lisa Ashton, plus quite a few other players that you can put in any given order, including another Anderson, Bob Anderson, James Wade, Jockey Wilson, 3-time world champion John Part, 3-time world champion John Lowe, and James Wade, who's never won a world title but has won 10 majors, and we'll get to later. I think all of them, their CVs, top to bottom, are much more complete and much more dynamic than Peter Wright's. So at least those 12, and if I thought a little longer, maybe I would find a few more that could go on there, but at least 12 players who I think are ahead of him for all time. But if we go for PDC, I think he has to be there now, if he wasn't already. Even if we accept the players who have won multiple world titles or made more world finals than Peter Wright should be ahead of him, that's just 7. Obviously, Taylor Van Gogh and Van Barneveld, Gary Anderson, who I mentioned before, and John Pardo I mentioned before. I'll throw in Adrian Lewis and Dennis Priestley, who I don't think I would actually put ahead of Peter Wright in the PDC annals. Adrian Lewis does have those 2 back-to-back world titles, but beyond that doesn't have that much, although does have a long career going for him. Dennis Priestley, he made 5 world finals, but his CV otherwise is a lot like Peter Wright's, a lot of runner-ups, and his longevity, okay, he stayed near the top for a while, but he was only at the real top for a good 6-7 years in the PDC. That's as long as Peter Wright, and Peter Wright has now won more than Dennis Priestley. So I would put him ahead of him and Adrian Lewis. The only other person I would throw in ahead of Peter Wright in the PDC is James Wade. So I guess I have him 6th, but you can make a case for him being 8th, but I think he's definitely top 10 PDC.
Yeah, it's a really interesting discussion, and shout out to one of our listeners, I think it was Thomas, who put a tweet to us going, where would you put him now in the debate for the best of all time, the best to ever do it? And go back 25 years ago when Peter Wright looked a lot different, was making his World Championship debut at the Lakeside, lost out in the first round. But if you imagine if he'd have played like he did 20 years later and brought that standard to Lakeside back then, and think of potentially how many titles he could have won in the early days of the PDC if he made the switch then, it's definitely food for thought. And unfortunately for him, wasn't able to pursue that career in the game until a little bit later on in life, and then he got to that world final. But he's in an elite group of company in terms of the PDC now. He's only the 10th player to win a third PDC ranking title on TV after the weekend. So for me, yeah, I'm a little bit similar to you. I don't think I'd put him in the top 10 of all time just yet. There's still a little bit more of his career to go, and he could push himself in there depending on what he's able to go on and do over the next 5 or 10 years. But I think top 10 PDC, I think that's definite. What does he need to do to get in that top 10 of all time? For me, I think he needs another world title. If he can go and get another world title at the end of this year or over the next few years, I think that really does strengthen his case of being in that top 10 of all time. And if he goes on and wins a few more big titles, I'm just looking in terms of players that have won more than the 3 ranking titles on TV in the PDC. If he's able to go and pick up a 4th in the next few months, then he'll be only the 7th player to do that. If he goes and gets a 5th, he'll be only the 5th player to do that. So he's climbing the ranks in terms of PDC history. He's top 10 PDC, top 10 all time, maybe not, maybe top 15, but he's still got years ahead of him to maybe push himself into that.
James Wade fell just short in his bid for a 10th PDC televised title, first in 2 years, but it was still enough to get him back into the top 8 in the world. I mean, we did just talk about him a little on the last question, but let's talk about him again. Does he get the plaudits he perhaps deserves for his longevity at the top of the game?
Yeah, perhaps not. And I was watching some of the darts at the weekend and chatting to my grandparents as well about it. And my granddad said during the final when he played against Peter Wright and he put in a big check out, it might have been the semi-final against Devon Peterson, actually said you can never write that bloke off. And that is right. You know, he's got 9 TV titles, and in terms of players, their longevity in the PDC, we look at the players that are in there at the minute. He's quite unrivaled in the current crop of players. You know, he's been in the top 8 for the last 10, 15 years. He got his first title 2005 and went professional 2006. And since then, by and large, he's been a top 8 player in the rankings for the majority of that time. I know he slipped out of the top 8 around 2017, got himself back in it and dropped out of it again. And this run that he had to the final at the weekend has pushed him back into that top 8. But he's a player that just keeps coming back, and full credit to him. Okay, maybe consistency-wise, results in these big events, that's maybe something that's been lacking over the last 5 years. It was 2014 he had a title and then on TV, and then he went 4 years without winning one, which I think is the longest break that he went since that breakthrough 2007. But keeps coming back, and look at his results at the weekend as well. First game coming through a decider 6-5. Second round against Nathan Aspinall, which I thought was a pick'em game, comes through that one 10-8. The semi-final as well, 8-6 down to Devon Peterson, who was averaging over a ton for a lot of that game and hanging in there, getting the 101 checkout to bring it back to 8-all. He gets it to 10-all, 180 in the deciding leg to pull away and win it. Hard to believe as well, last year, I know it seems like a long time ago, but last year he was in the Premier League and he did get to the semi-finals, finished 3rd in the end, and after the 4th week he was in that top 4 for the rest of it. So he is a player that can match it with the best of them. Maybe, as I say, he's consistency-wise producing it week in, week out is something that's been missing, and I think he said in one of his interviews as well over the weekend that he's only started taking it seriously for the last few weeks. So he is someone that maybe doesn't quite have that concentration or commitment right now. I know he's been around for a little while, and that's something that can fade away a little bit once you've been doing it for such a long time. But yeah, I think he does deserve a lot more credit than he gets, and keeps putting himself in these positions. And I think it won't be the last time we see him in one of these finals.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement. And, you know, there's a reason that I included him not just in the conversation of the top 10 PDC players of all time, but the top 10 players of all time, full stop, despite the fact that he's never even made a world final. And it's because of how long he has been so consistently good. And it is, I mean, there are no guarantees in darts, but it feels like almost unbelievable that he hasn't even been able to make a world final. When you talk about a 10-year run where he made at least the quarterfinals of the World Championships 8 times, made 3 World Championship semifinals, and has won or made the final of pretty much every other major event during that time period. The only one that he, of the ranking majors, other than the World Championships, that he hasn't been to the final of is the Players' Championship final, which surprisingly, of course, at least for the last decade now, has been the event that's right before the World Championship. And I don't know, maybe it's just something about December time that he's not able to get to his best. Although 8 World Championship quarterfinals in 10 years seems to indicate otherwise. But the fact that he's been able to keep this up, even as other players have come and go, even as the overall standard of the game has gotten so much deeper and so much better overall, that he has remained there. Okay, maybe not as the world number 2 or world number 3 as he was, but still a top 10 player almost every single week for a decade and a half is truly impressive, and he doesn't get that same recognition. And I think that is partially because he hasn't won a world title or even made a world final. And he hasn't been as good the last few years as he was if we go back half a decade ago. But this past weekend showed exactly what he can do. And that semifinal against Devin Peterson was James Wade at his most James Wade. Devin didn't really do much wrong. Okay, he did start to fall off near the end, but that's because James Wade just kept hitting him every chance James Wade had. And it wasn't one or two legs aside Devin Peterson doing something wrong. It was just James Wade hitting a big combination at the right time, hitting a 177 to leave tops at the right time, hitting last start in hand after missing a couple at double to really just take the wind out of Devin. That's what James Wade has done for years. He is the best match player of anyone, other than maybe Michael Van Gerwen and Phil Taylor of this generation. And he showed it this past weekend. It wasn't enough to lift the title, but it was enough to continue to cement his legacy as one of the best of all time.
Now we're going to turn our chat to the PDC World Cup of Darts this weekend. But before we do, let's hear from a player who's no stranger to a giant killing in the competition over recent years. Here's our chat with Singapore's Harith Lim.
I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the former World Youth Master, Harith Lim. Thank you very much for the time, Harith. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm good. Nice to hear from you.
And it's nice to have your time. And first off, where did it all start for you in darts?
I started darts a long time ago. I think it was like 1985. It was like in a family club. We used to have dinner in the club, and I had an aunt and an uncle who plays darts. So I was interested, and I started throwing, and it never stopped until like year 2003. That's when I stopped darts for about 9 years, and I started playing soft darts again in 2011.
So 1985 then, the following year, 1986, as a 16-year-old, you come over to the UK and you win the World Youth Masters. Talk to me a little bit about how that will come about, you coming over here to play in that event.
Oh, yeah. That was my first time in England, actually. It was really nerve-wracking. I was so nervous because all the big names that I used to watch on the television, I get to see them in person, like John Lowe, Eric Bristow, Jockey Wilson and all that. So it was really, really very, very exciting for me. And it was a major thing, for a 16-year-old kid at that time. And to win it, I tell you, it's really something I would always remember.
What memories come to mind then of that tournament? Because obviously I know it's a little while ago now, but that's probably one of the biggest titles that you've won. And as you mentioned there, you were mingling it with a lot of the legends of the game that week.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was really mind blowing. It is something that you will always remember. You get to see all the superstars. You get to see your idols. It was something that I always talk about. And it will be me forever, definitely.
Now, since then, we probably know you more through your soft tip playing days, and soft tip obviously big in Asia, and I believe the Singapore Super League, not in the current restrictions at the moment, but usually before you had around 2,000 players, 250 teams, so it's quite big soft tip over in Singapore. That's
right. Soft tip is growing. It is growing in Singapore. It's growing in Asia. It is really, really very popular. It is easy to play. It is everything is assisted. You have got a machine. All you do is slot in the money and then you can compete. Targets are bigger. So for us in that level, in the higher level, just a single miss is very costly. It could cost us the game, actually. So consistency in a soft tip game is different. When you play traditional steel darts, is very different. The game itself is very different. So it is very challenging. That's the reason why when I came back to play darts in 2011, it was basically all soft tip until the first PDC World Cup appearance, I think in 2013 or 14, that I played with Paul back then.
So, yeah, just touching on the World Cup, and we'll come on to the unfortunate news in a moment. But, yeah, the first appearance I've got down for you in the PDC World Cup 2014 alongside Paul Lim. What was it like when you got the call up to say that you'd be involved in that event for the first time?
Oh, you know what? I went to the dart shop. I went to a nearby dart shop, a friend's shop. I got myself the steel tip dartboard and started throwing, because it's the World Cup. It's not just an ordinary steel tip event. It's the World Cup. So I told myself I have to get the dartboard to put it at home. And then I started throwing and throwing and throwing and throwing. And, I just wanted a steel tip feel to come back. And then because soft tip is totally different. And then it felt really good. And then I told Paulie, I said, hey, I'm ready to go. Let's go do some, damage. and then that was the first time. It was exciting.
Yeah, and you and Paul have certainly done some damage over the last few years. I mean, fast forward 3 years after that first appearance, 2017, one of the biggest shocks in the event's history, knocking out the Scotland team, Gary Anderson and Peter Wright. What memories come to mind when I bring up that win?
Oh wow, that was unbelievable. That me and Paulie, when we were practicing, all we did was we were telling ourselves, just play the way we play. Just play, like the way we play. Just be ourselves, Go up there and then just not think about anything else and just, do this, perform to the way we can. And I mean, fortunately, we won, and then it was really unbelievable. We went back to the room. We really couldn't even, our eyes were wide open. We were so excited still.
So you and Paul get to the quarterfinals that year. The last couple of years, you've got to the last 16. Last year, of course, beating Wales in the first round.
Yeah, that's right. It was tough playing Wales last year because, Gerwyn Price is hot now, and then Johnny Clayton is one of the best now, It was really tough. Similarly, we took the same approach like we played Scotland in 2017. Because Wales were a great team too. So the approach was the same. We stayed focused and we just played like we can, and then let's see what happens. And then fortunately again, we won that match. So it was very very satisfying, and we were really happy.
And we've seen you and Paul over the years. You've had a great partnership on the hockey together. And Darts in Asia, when we think of it, Paul Lim's one of the big names, such a legend in the game. When was the first time that you met Paul?
Oh, he's definitely a legend. He's my hero. He's one of my best friends. We've been friends for like 35 years. I first met him when I was 15. And then I used to train with him at a railway station in Singapore where he was based. And then we were friends, and then we became good friends, and then we became like brothers, So I think that is the reason why that partnership became very easy, very natural, because we off the hockey, we are very, very good friends. So that combination maybe helped us, achieve like so far like what we did. Yeah.
The last couple of years we've seen the PDC bring in the Asian tour. You got to a final 2018. What's it been like playing on the Asian tour? I know you haven't been able to play on it this year because of the virus, but the last couple of years, what's it been like seeing that come on board?
When we heard about the PDC Asia happening, we were very happy. We finally Asia we have got a PDC tour, but because we also have our soft tip tour, so it was tough getting the dates and all the competitions together, because some of the games that we play they actually clash in terms of the date and the period. So we had to really get everything organized and then focus on playing both the soft darts tour and also the PDC Asia tour. But it was really, really very challenging. I'm very looking forward to the PDC Asia tour if it comes around next year.
Fingers crossed for that. And as we know, that the virus has cancelled a lot of events this year. And as we've spoken off air before we started, unfortunately for you and Paul, not going to be able to play the World Cup this week. How did that come about? When did you find out that it wasn't going to be possible for you to go over there?
I went through so much trouble, to be very honest, because Singapore really very strict in terms of this COVID-19 virus. Our numbers have been very low. we have got like single-digit numbers or even zero numbers every day. It's been like for about 1-2 months now. Our death rate is the lowest. The government is really, really very tight on this pandemic, and it was so difficult for me to get any approval to fly to a high-risk country that is Austria. And when I finally got my approval, I did my swab test, and then when I come back to Singapore after the tournament, I have to be actually quarantined in a government designated facility, and I have to pay for that myself. And then, but I was okay. I was prepared, and then I was ready. And then I spoke to Paul, and he says, "Okay, we are all set and all that." And then on Sunday, that is the 1st of November, we got news that Austria is going into a lockdown. And then we fly on Tuesday, that is the 3rd. So what I did was I had to confirm my flight out. And then I spoke to the relevant authorities, and I was told that I wouldn't be able to go because I wouldn't be able to come back from a country that's on lockdown. So unfortunately, I can't make I can't make the trip for the World Cup this time round. Very disappointing, really very disappointing after all that I've been through.
Yeah, I can understand. It's a massive shame, and especially the year that we've had, there's been so many events that have been called off. So to have this event really to look forward to, I mean, yourself and Paul must be absolutely gutted that you're not going to be able to head over there.
That's right. We have been at the World Cup since we played the first time. We have always been looking forward to it. It's such a great event, but unfortunately this time round, the virus is in control, and we really can't do much. I mean, the country, Singapore, they are really strict right now, very strict right now. They don't want to take the risk, and then they can't make any exceptions. So we just have to abide by it. Just have to follow the rules.
I know it's difficult really to look to the future at the moment, but what goals do you have really in darts, soft tip or steel tip really going forward? What would you like to try and achieve?
I tell you what, honestly, I am very comfortable in the soft tip tour. My next goal, sincerely, is to actually do well in the PDC Asia Tour and hopefully make the World Championship. That is my goal next year, or when this virus thing is over. That is sincerely my number one wish, to actually qualify for the World Championships through the PDC Asia.
Well, we'd love to see that, Harith. Fingers crossed that can happen next year and things can start to get back to normal, and really appreciate your time. And again, sorry to hear you won't be involved in the World Cup, but we do wish you all the best for the rest of this year.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thanks again to Harith for joining us. Now let's move our attention to the PDC World Cup. The 10th staging of the tournament gets the green light, but behind closed doors in Austria this weekend. Who do you see as the leading contenders for the title?
I'm afraid to make a prediction because by the time this goes there, who knows if some of the countries will have withdrawn. We've already, of course, seen Singapore pull out. Very possible other countries will, even if the event can go forward as Austria enters lockdown. But I think you have to start with the number 2 seed here, as you do a lot of times in the World Cup, because very often the Netherlands have been the number 2 seed, but they're not this time. It's Wales. But Wales, I think you can make an argument, have the number 1 player who's playing the best right now, as well as the number 2 player who's playing the best right now of any of the number 2 players. Goran Price is right there in that conversation with Van Gogh and Peter Wright. And Peter Wright, of course, not in this event as the best player in the world right now. And Johnny Clayton has really been back at or near his best since the return from, well, now I guess we should say the first lockdown, but at least the long stoppage in darts. And how can you then look past the team that has probably the best number 1 and the best number 2 of anyone else in this competition? And they don't have that unfavorable a draw. Yes, potential second round. It's not Scotland's A team. It's a Scotland team that involves Robert Thornton, who's really struggled of late, and a John Henderson, who's also really struggled for the last 18 months now. Wales is as much, if not a bigger favorite of any country to make the quarterfinal, and probably go on from there. Beyond Wales, if I'm going to pick a team from the top half that I think could have a good run, top half, it's the weaker half, but let's say Northern Ireland. Daryl Gurney has shown some flashes, but he's been inconsistent. Brendan Dolan hasn't been as good as he was last year, but they do have a favorable draw going against Canada in the first round and then either New Zealand or Denmark. If they can get some wins under their belt, if they can get some confidence, they're a pair that has a lot of experience playing together and have had some good performances on this stage. If they can get a couple wins, they could start going for what is, I think, the weaker of the two halves.
Look at the field for this event. As we know, we've known for a few weeks now that the defending champions Gary Anderson and Peter Wright are not going to be heading to Austria this weekend. And I said last year, well, over a year ago now, the tournament last year was in this regular slot in June. But I said after they won that title, it kind of felt like this was the start of maybe a bit of dominance in this tournament, like we've seen in the past with Phil Taylor and Adrian Lewis and Michael van Gerwen and Raymond van Barneveld. But as I say, those two not in the field this weekend. And it does open it up quite a bit, doesn't it? Because just looking at the odds that were put up earlier today, these might have changed by the time you're listening to this. But Wales, the team you mentioned there, they are the slight favourites at 3-1. England, the top seed, 7-2. Netherlands, Michael van Gerwen, who's won it 3 times before, they're 4-1. So in terms of those three, they are the top 3 seeds for this tournament. You can't really pick between them, but I'll go for a few others outside of those 3. And one team I'll mention right off the bat is Belgium. Dimitri van den Berg and Kim Huybrechts. Of course, we know in the past it's been the Huybrechts brothers, but Dimitri coming into the team 2018, got to a semi-final last year, got to the quarterfinals, and who did they lose to? The team of Gary Anderson and Peter Wright, and Gary Anderson averaging 100, Peter Wright averaging 110 to get past them in 2 singles games. So they haven't got to put up with them this time. That could be a team to watch out for. And 2 others I'll give a mention to. One who's making his debut, Gabriel Clemens, in that German team alongside Max Hopp. Both have been playing reasonably well over the last few months, not quite getting on some big runs, but Gabriel, he's now in the top 32. He's continuing to progress, and I think they'll fancy that bottom quarter of the draw, maybe at least until you get to the Netherlands, if they get that far of going on a run. And one other team I'll mention as well, Austria. They've got to do the least amount of travel out of all the teams, and that's a big talking point for this tournament with all the players that are coming from all around the world. This is based where they are, and Roby John Rodriguez back in the team with Mensa Suljovic, and we know those two get on very well. They've got to 2 quarterfinals in the past, 2016, 2017, and last couple of years it's been Zoran Lerchbacher who's partnered Mensa. They've not had the best of it, but those two back together on home territory, I know there's not going to be a crowd to cheer them on, but they could be ones to watch in that top quarter of the draw as well.
There's some good points there. Now, this will be the first time since Raymond van Barneveld. I'm going to read what it says here, Barney and Co. I assume that means in companies. I don't know who else Co could be. But the first time since Raymond van Barneveld and Co won the title in 2010, the defending champions will not be competing, as Peter Wright and Gary Anderson both pulled out. Individually, the only former champion in the field, 3-time champion Michael van Gerwen. But of course, the Netherlands, with and without him, England and Scotland have won it as teams. Do you think we could see another first-time World Cup winner this year?
I think we do. We've only had 3 countries win this tournament before. Netherlands 4 times, England 4 times, Scotland winning it for the first time last year. I do think we're going to get a new name on the pot this year, and the Scotland team of John Henderson and Robert Thornton, don't think we can really rate them as one of the leading contenders this weekend, especially when they could come up against Wales in the second round. England as well. Rob Cross, okay, maybe the pressure will be off him this weekend. He's had some early exits in the big ranking events over the last few months. This, of course, not a ranking event. Maybe he can relax a little bit on that stage. And Michael Smith as well, still looking for that first big TV title. I know he's won a World Series event. If he won this, would he count it as his first big TV title? Probably not. So he could probably relax a little bit, but I don't see them going all the way. And the Netherlands team as well, I spoke to Co about this only quite recently, and it's a new partner for Michael van Gerwen, Danny Noppert. Could this be the last year we see them two together? It seems to be since Raymond van Barneveld's gone off the scene. Jermaine Wattermina last year, Danny Noppert this year. Could potentially be Dirk van Dyvenberg next year, or maybe even Jeffrey de Zwaan, seeing how the form goes over the next 12 months or when this tournament goes ahead next year. But yeah, I think we are going to get a new winner. I've mentioned a few. You mentioned Wales. I'll put them in there. And I'll chuck out the other 3 names that I just mentioned as well. Belgium, Germany and Austria. I think we are going to see a new name on the pot, and potentially 2 finalists going up against each other that haven't won it before as well.
Yeah, and potentially 2 finalists involving 4 players who are not currently qualified for the Grand Slam. So a lot that could happen here, considering field is so wide open without the Scottish number one or the Scottish number two there. And yeah, I think we will see a new first-time winner. I don't think that England team is playing up to scratch right now. I don't think the Dutch team is playing up to scratch right now. And obviously, we've both mentioned the Scottish team not having either Peter Wright or Gary Anderson. I think at that point, you have to say it's more likely than it's unlikely that we'll have a new winner. And I think Wales is that most likely. I think they are the most complete. Beyond them, any of the other seeded teams. And did you just mention Ireland? Because even if you didn't, I want to mention them as well. Remember, they made the final last year. They were the story, I guess, almost 18 months ago now. And it wasn't really a fluke. They were playing really well in that tournament. And Willie O'Connor is playing as well, if not better, than he was then. Steve Lennon was struggling heading into that tournament, but he has definitely rebounded. He's not necessarily back where he was in his first year or two in the PDC, where he very temporarily moved into the top 32, but was looking like a player who would be a top 32 player to stay. But he's getting back towards that. Willie O'Connor has been just going from strength to strength for a while now. That Irish team, they showed they could do it last year by making the final. Maybe this is the year they go one step further if they get past Wales, at least in the quarterfinal. But I do think we will have a first-time winner. I'm not going to say who, but I will say that it's most likely Wales.
Yeah, Ireland definitely a contender, and Australia as well. Simon Whitlock and Damon Heta teaming up for the first time. So plenty of teams in there that all fancy going all the way. But let's move on to our next guest on this week's show, and it is going to be a player making his debut in the World Cup this weekend. Here's our chat with Canada's Matt Campbell. By one half of Team Canada in this year's PDC World Cup of Darts, Matt Campbell. Thanks for the time, Matt. How you doing?
Yeah, no worries. I'm not too bad. About yourself?
Doing well, thank you. And it's going to be an exciting end to 2020 coming up for you, the World Cup. You're going to be in the World Championship as well at the end of the year. But first, I want to go right back to the beginning for you in darts. Where did it all begin?
Started off in my buddy's garage, actually. His parents taught us how to play and then ran a league out of their garage and kind of pushed us towards like the Legion and played there. And then from there, you just meet so many different people to push you down different avenues. But it all started off in the garage with my buddies.
Round about what age were you when this all started?
About 18 or 19.
So, of course, when we think of Canada and darts, a name which immediately springs up to mind is John Part and his third world title win, I think around 2008. You would have been around 17, 18. Was that an inspiration as well to you at that time?
Actually, at that time, I didn't really watch any darts, didn't really know anything about it as a sport. It was just a good way to hang out with good friends.
Oh, right, okay. So when did you sort of learn about where you are back there in Canada? You had a three-time world champion, one of the best in the game at that time.
Probably about, I would say, six years after I started playing, I kind of started to watch darts and then heard that he's accomplished what he did, and yeah, it was fairly long into me playing before I even knew anybody could actually do anything with the sport.
So what was the main inspiration then for you behind entering more events the last few years? We've seen you play the CDC. How much has helping that as well helped improve your game as well?
So yeah, playing the CDC has helped my game tremendously. It's not all the time you could go and play the best players in North America and try to prove yourself to be one of those best players in North America. So it really puts pressure on to practice and keep your game sharp just to be able to compete.
Last December, we first saw you on our screens here in the UK, the second day of the PDC World Championship at Ali Pali. What was the feeling like, though, when you found out you'd qualified as the highest ranked Canadian on the CDC circuit?
Feeling was amazing. Like, I really can't explain it. To go from just playing in a garage to taking my steps to the biggest stage in the world is just, yeah, can't really explain it. A lot of hard work.
When you came over to play, was that the first time you've been over to the UK?
I went over for the BDO World Masters in October beforehand. So it would be the second time I went over.
I was at that event actually, and it turned out to be quite the experience with the redraw and everything like that. What did you make of all of that?
Oh, it was complete.
So when you go from your first visit here to then playing in an event which is obviously a lot better run, the PDC World Championship, how do the two really compare for you?
Oh, there's zero comparison. Like when I went over for the PDC World Championship, they pretty much treat you like gold. So they make sure you have everything, put your own room, whatever. And then when I was over there for the BDO World Masters, like they don't give a shit who you are or if you're there to play or there to watch. Like, and the worst part about the BDO was being forced to sign a contract stating that if I got the spot to play their world championships, I wouldn't play the PDC. So it was just kind of fucked up in that aspect.
So that was yourself and a few other players that came over, a few American players as well. What were you feeling about when you got offered that contract at the time?
Oh, I thought it was a joke. Like, I was ready to walk out. Like, if they're going to make us sign a contract, they could have, like, emailed us a month beforehand or 2 months beforehand before we paid for our flight, paid for our hotel, and then just get sprung on day of. Kind of ridiculous, in my opinion.
On to better times then, and playing in that World Championship for the first time. How did you find the whole walk-on and the whole experience of playing in the biggest event there is in darts?
It was really an amazing experience. I've watched darts before going over there, and I thought it'd be pretty cool to be able to do that. And then when I had the chance to do it, like, it's just such a surreal experience. And at that point, you really are trying to just keep your mind focused, so you don't really get to enjoy the moment as much as you would, I would think, or as much as I could have anyways.
It turned out to be a really exciting session as well. Darren Young knocking out Raymond van Barneveld in his final tournament. Rob Cross going out that session as well. You lost out 3-1 in the end in your game. What were the main things you took away from the whole experience when you went back home?
Kind of just, like, keep your mind in the right mindset instead of, like, looking back and noticing all the crowd. Just focus on the game ahead. Yeah, and, like, when you take your break, make sure you can still stay mentally sharp and just practice my doubles, practice everything.
This year's been a crazy year with the pandemic. What have things been like in Canada over the last 7 or 8 months?
For dart-wise, there's been absolutely nothing really, so just a lot of online darts. Where I am right now, they're starting to slowly open things up, so we're able to do more things, but I don't think it'll be back to normal for another year or so.
So the end of September, you got the chance to play the CDC Canadian Series in Ontario. When you found out about those events being put on, how are you feeling about your chances and form going into it?
I was excited and nervous at the same time because it's been so long since playing a live event that I wasn't sure if I'd be able to take my practice routine and online play to a live event. But still very excited to be able to play live players and top players in the country as well.
As it turned out, a very successful weekend for yourself. Over the 4 events, you finished 2 points clear of Jim Long to secure that spot in Team Canada for the PDC World Cup coming up in early November. How excited are you to represent your country in that event for the first time?
Very excited. Me and Jim are good friends, and he had the opportunity to do it last year, and he told me about his great experience and how he enjoyed being there. So I'm hoping I can go there and enjoy my experience as well.
And given the current circumstances in the world, it's an ambitious event for any organisation to try and put on. You've got 32 nations from around the world, 64 players coming into Austria. How are things set up for you at the moment, travel-wise, getting there?
So I've got my flight booked and my hotel booked there. I just got to book my COVID test so I could get that done before heading over. And hopefully everything runs smoothly and no delays and get to show up and play.
Fingers crossed for that. Well, you're going to be partnering up with Jeff Smith, who, of course, has a tour card on the circuit at the moment, take on Northern Ireland in the first round, the fourth seeds. What was your reaction when you saw the draw?
I figure anybody representing their country is going to be great players and be capable of beating anybody. So I believe it's going to come down to who's on that time. I believe this is like the only tournament where the professionals actually play doubles. So I feel like it's really anybody's game.
And also from the Canadian Series, you qualified for your second consecutive World Championship. Details still to be finalised as we're talking at the moment. How much, though, are you looking forward to having another crack at that World Championship?
Oh, I can't wait for it. I believe I didn't show myself well or as well as I could have last year. So I'm hoping to be able to come back and show what I'm actually capable of.
And going forward beyond this year, 2020, what are your future goals? Do you envisage yourself trying to emulate Jeff by getting that tour card at Q School and spending periods in the UK to play the tour? What ambitions do you have for the game?
Actually, yeah, I do plan on. I'm going to be trying to obtain my tour card. If I earn that, then really just try to go over and play as much as I can and see what happens. And if I don't earn it, then I'll play the challenge tours and see what I'm capable of doing.
Well, we look forward to that, and we look forward to seeing you playing in the World Cup and the World Championship later on this year. And thank you very much for joining us.
No, thank you.
Thanks again to Matt for joining us. Now, a word on our sponsors, Low Six. Of course, if you listened last week, you know we ran the contest for you guys, £100 prize pot, and if anyone got 16 out of 16 right from the first round games in the European Championship, you would have been invited on the show this week as our guest tipster. But unfortunately, no one quite going 16 out of 16. We did have one person win £50 of the prize, getting 13 out of 16. Congratulations to Bradster's 84, and a shout out as well to Richard Stanway. We put a tweet up early on in that bumper session saying what time is the final match start going to go in for the 16th game, and Richard, spot on, 11:21 p.m. I don't know how he did it, but congratulations to him. In terms of us, battle of the co-hosts, well, it was pretty one-sided. The scoreline looks pretty tight, but it was over with about 4 or 5 games to go. Burton, you taking the honours with that one, 9-8, and I'll try and win a little bit of pride back this week because we're hoping to have a contest for Friday's games, and we could give you guys another chance. I guess we'll run all 16 games. If anyone gets all 16 right, we'll potentially invite you on the show next week as a guest tipster. But let's pick some games out. We'll go with the first 4 games lined up for that Friday afternoon, 12 p.m. here in the UK, and kicking off the tournament we have Lithuania against Gibraltar. How do you see the first game going?
No disrespect for our guest that you'll be hearing from shortly, but I think you have to favor Lithuania in this one. Obviously, the Paris format is different, but Darius Labanauskas was in the BDO for a long time. So he will have had experience playing Paris, and very possibly with Mindaugas Barauskas, his partner. And Labanauskas is only a World Championship quarterfinalist in both codes. Much more experience on the big stage, even though this won't be in front of a crowd. It's tough to see past Lithuania in this one. I think they'll win it comfortably. I'll go 5-1.
Well, I'll stick up for our guest on the show this week. Then I'll go with Craig, and yeah, he's going to be a bit of a baptism of fire for these two young lads, both 18 years of age, and I believe they're going to be the youngest team ever to play in the PDC World Cup. And this is, of course, going to be the first year that we won't see Dyson Parody. He was one of the ever presents in this tournament. He not qualifying, and these two young lads, they did come through the qualifiers. They finished in that top 2. They've deserved their spots on merit, and yeah, I guess on paper Darius Labanauskas is going to be the star name to look out for in this tie. But I'll go with the upset. I'll go with Gibraltar. I'll go the other way.
Now, second game of the night, it's Hong Kong against China in an all East Asian affair. How do you see that one?
Well, like the first game, I think these two teams will be happy with the draw. They've both missed out on going up against one of the big seeds, and last year these two teams won 2 legs between them in the first round, both going out 5-1. So they'll be looking for better this time round. I think I'm going to go with Hong Kong on this one. They've got Kai Fan Lung in there and Royden Lam as well. Royden Lam, a former tour card holder. Kai Fan is on the tour at the moment. He's more used to playing on that stage, played on the European tour quite recently. So, and I know that the China team's had a few changes over the last few weeks as well, probably due to the travel restrictions and things going on outside of darts at the moment. So I'll go with Hong Kong for this one.
I'm going to have to agree with you there. Long has played pretty well when we've seen him so far in the PDC. It's only thing that's gone wrong is some inconsistency. Royden Lam, of course, been around for a very long time, and it's tough to see past them as well. I think they're the more experienced, more talented team, and I think that will see them over the line. I think China will get a few legs. The Chinese team does get better year in, year out, but I don't think they're a match for this Hong Kong team. I'll go 5-2 to Hong Kong.
Third game of the afternoon session then, and it is the debutants Portugal taking the place of Singapore in the field, taking on Hungary. How do you see this game going?
Yeah, Portugal, the last minute, or almost last minute, I should say, replacement for Singapore, but they're only a replacement on paper because you have one of the best players in the world right now in Jose de Sousa leading that team. We don't know much about his teammate, but I don't think we need to know much about his teammate because as long as Jose plays anywhere near his best, I think that will just be too much of scoring power and too much overall consistency for a fairly decent Hungary team. But I just don't think they're a match for Jose de Sousa. I'll go 5-3.
Ooh, okay, I'll go the other direction then. And yeah, as the first game that we touched on with Darius being the big name of the 4 players involved, Jose, of course, will be the big name. And last weekend, getting that 9 darter in the European Championship, he is a player in some excellent form. As you say, question marks around his partner, Jose Marquez. We're not quite sure how he's going to cope with playing on TV, playing on that stage for the first time. And I look to the Hungary team as well. Patrick Kovacs playing in the WDF Virtual Cup at the moment. I don't know if it was today when we're recording or quite over the last couple of days, but knocking out Martin Adams in the semi-finals. He's into the final of that. And earlier on, I think he had 112 average in one of the knockout rounds. So he's playing some good stuff. Okay, it's online, but we're going to be behind closed doors this weekend. There's not going to be any fans there. So it is going to be a similar atmosphere. They'll probably pump in a bit of crowd noise, but there'll be as many people that were in Patrick Kovacs' dart room watching him put in them big averages as there will be this weekend. So I'll go with the other direction. I'll go Hungary for this one.
And then last of all, it's New Zealand and Denmark. Denmark, of course, one of the involves Per Larsen, one of the few remaining ever presents.
I'll go with New Zealand on this one. And last year they had a fantastic run, didn't they? Halpe Pua and Cody Harris getting to the quarterfinals. They were one of the impressive teams. And last year as well, there was a lot of teams that put in some performances that maybe we didn't quite expect, teams that were unseeded, and New Zealand, they were certainly one of them. And I'm going to go with New Zealand on this one. I think it could be tight. Per Larsen, we know what he's capable of, but I think just those two together, they seem to gel really well. I'm going with New Zealand.
I guess I'll go the other direction, since every time I've gone first, you've gone the other direction. I'll just to make sure we don't end up in a tie, I'll go for the Danish team. You mentioned how well New Zealand played last year, and Cody Harris, I've said multiple times on this show, is quite possibly the best player to have given Q School a go that has still never won a tour card. This year, with everything going on, I think the not having to travel halfway around the world is a big advantage. And knowing that, at least for Harith Lim, when he gets back, he's going to have to quarantine for a while, just a lot more that will be on their minds than on the Danish team, and maybe that will just make that little bit of a difference. So to be different, I will go Denmark to win it 5-4, just in the realities of the COVID-19 world, although I do think that you're probably correct on this one.
Well, those are our picks. We'll put out on Twitter as well our picks for all of the 16 first round ties on Friday. And if you want to get involved in our competition on Low 6, download the Low 6 app. 18 plus, UK residents only, T&Cs apply. Please gamble responsibly, begambleaware.org. And just had a message while you were chatting there from Low 6 saying that we've got another £100 prize pool for this competition. It's free entry as well, so go and check those guys out, go and support them, because they do support us. So yeah, we appreciate their support, and good luck to everyone who gets involved. And as I said, if you get 16 out of 16, could potentially be on the show next week. And now we'll hear from our final guest on this week's show, and it is going to be another debutant in the World Cup this weekend. It is Gibraltar's Craig Galliano. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by one of this year's debutants in the PDC World Cup of Darts, Craig Galliano. Thank you very much for the time, Craig. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm good. And you?
Doing well, thank you. And first of all, we'll get into the World Cup in a moment, but where did your interest in darts come from, and how long have you been playing now?
Well, I'd say when I was 2 years old, to be honest, and funny enough, I got a dartboard for Christmas, and I had it on my sofa, and I was playing with my granddad here at home. All the time I used to come home from school and I used to say, let's play darts. And since then I started playing, and I played for around 4 years, just normal, just like here at my house and that. And I left it when I was around 9 or 10, and when my granddad passed away, he was a really big darts fan. So I said, let's give it another go. So I just picked up the darts and I started playing, and ever since then I've loved the sport again. So I've been playing for now around 5 years properly, and I've loved the game ever since.
And it's been a couple of weeks now since yourself and Justin Hewitt secured the 2 spots to represent Gibraltar in the World Cup coming up. How did the whole qualifying system work this year? Was it similar to previous years? Obviously we've got a lot of restrictions at the moment. How did it all work?
Well, to be honest, this year it was different. This year was 6 qualifiers, unlike last year when we played 2 qualifiers. The 2 winners qualified for the World Cup. This year was changed by a rule I think was implemented. So we played 3 before the pandemic, and I was top at that time, winning 1 and 1 final, 1 semi, but everything stopped because of the pandemic, and we didn't play competitive darts for months. So last week, I think it was, last week we came back and we played the last 3 that were left to decide the top 2 who were going to go represent Gibraltar, and lucky enough I qualified, me and Justin, to represent Gibraltar at the World Cup of Darts in a few weeks.
That must have been hard then, obviously, not playing for a long time, being top of the standings before the break, and then coming back to play those final events. And going into that final event, I believe you needed to win the whole thing to get into that top two. How were you feeling about your chances of doing that?
Yeah, like you said, I was top in the first three. I was top, and I came into the fourth one being top, and after the fifth one, I dropped down to third. Like you've just said, going into the last one, I knew I had to do a job. I had to go there and to win. But I knew I could win if I played well, and I play how I can play. I knew I could go there and win. So lucky enough, I did it. Although it was a lot of pressure, because I was just thinking, like, I was first 2 days ago, and now I'm third, and there's only one more try. If I don't do it, I won't go. So it was a hard test for me. But lucky enough, me and Justin are going to the World Cup of Darts.
Yeah, you came through that test to get that spot alongside Justin. What was the feeling like when you'd won that event and you knew that you'd be representing Gibraltar in such a big event on TV for the first time?
Well, that's a feeling I don't think I've ever witnessed in the game of darts before. Like I said, I've been playing since I was 2, and I've always loved the game. I'm a big darts fan. Not only I play, I watch the darts every week. Pro Tours, Euro Tours, I watch everything at home when I can. So I've always said, when I was at the youth with Alex, Jeremy and Justin, Sean and everyone there, I always said for years I want to play there at the World Cup of Darts, watching Dyson, Anthony, Dylan, everyone playing there. And I told them I want to be there in a few years, and in a few weeks' time it's about to happen. So I'm really excited and happy that I'm doing it.
And yourself and Justin, only 18 years old, a strong chance you two will be the youngest team ever to play in a PDC World Cup. Just how excited are you both to get up on that stage and show what you can do?
Like me and Justin spoke, we've been best friends since we were small. We used to go to first school together, and now we're playing darts together in the PDC stage. It's unreal, to be honest. So we're just going to go up there, give us a best shot, and we know that we can both play darts. If we both play darts, then we could do something. So I hope we can go there without any nerves. Obviously, it's going to be nerves because it's a World Cup of Darts, the first time representing Gibraltar at the PDC stage. So hopefully we can go out there and do a job for Gibraltar.
You mentioned Dyson as well. When we think of darts in Gibraltar, one of the names that springs immediately to mind is his, and this will be the first time that he's missed out on the World Cup. Did he have any words of advice for you two?
Yeah, for sure. Dyson, like you've said, Dyson's been there for the last 9 years, I believe, yeah. And yeah, last year he coached us at the BBC, and he was brilliant, to be honest. So, like he said, he was gutted that he's not going to play with one of us this year, but it is what it is. 1 year, he's been there for 9 years, and now it's our turn to get up there and give it our best. But yeah, Dyson is obviously a great guy, and he will always support us, even though he's not there. I believe and I hope he will be there cheering us on.
Definitely, yeah. And as you've seen the draws out now for the first round, you've missed out on playing one of the 8 seeds, but still a tough-looking opener against Lithuania in the first round. What was your reaction when you saw the draw?
I actually wasn't watching that. You got home and I just saw it on Twitter. But yeah, like you said, we missed out on England, I believe, in the first draw, in the first ball, I think. But like I said, I told Justin and my team that there's no easy games there. Everyone's gonna be tough. Wherever we get. Yeah, I know Darius is a very, very good player. I don't know much of the other one, but I believe he's just as good. So it's a tough draw, obviously. But like I told Justin, if we can go there and play like we can play, then we can do something. So let's hope and let's see how we turn up on the day.
And away from the World Cup, you were over in the UK only last month for the last weekend of the development tour. How did you find that whole experience of facing the best players in your age group?
Well, yeah, like you said, last week or 2 weeks ago, I was there. My first development tour, to be honest. First time I went, and because I just signed with Darts Promotions, and I went that way with Justin and Sean. But yeah, it was an amazing experience. I really saw what the game of darts is, and there's no really bad players there, man. They're incredible. The standard of darts now is really, really good. So it was a good week, to be honest. So I'm happy that I was there to experience that.
Even though the results didn't go your way that weekend, was that a bit of a eye-opener for you in terms of where you need to get your game to get to that standard and compete with the best players?
Yeah, for sure. The first day I wasn't very good. The second day I was much better. As the weekend went on, I think I was better. But like you said, that the results were they weren't as good. I didn't know what I was going to expect in that, but now I know. So next year I know what I'm going to expect. So I'm going to go for more and more every time. So let's see what happens.
And as we spoke off air, darts isn't the only sport that you play. You're also into your football. You're signed with Lincoln Red Imps in the Gibraltar National League, and you've played youth level for Gibraltar. Just talk to me a little bit about your football career as well.
Well, just like that, I think I've been playing football for my whole life. I've never stopped playing football. I started when I was 4 with Lincoln, and I'm 18 now, and I'm still playing for them. I've gone up from the youth level. I played with the national team as well. So I'm proud to represent my national Gibraltar in football and in darts now. But yeah, like I said, with Lincoln, I've been there for around 14 years now, and national I've played from the youth level and played with the seniors before. So yeah, I still play football, although I haven't been as much in the last few weeks with the darts and everything happening. But yes, I still play with them, and I'm happy that I can play both sports, to be honest.
Yeah, I was going to say, both keeping you busy. How do you juggle the two together? Because the darts often, we have the weekend events, and the football, I'm assuming, is played a lot on the weekends as well. So how do you juggle the two, make sure that you can play as much as you can in both?
Well, to be honest with you, I have an experience. I've only gone to one development tour, like you said, it was 2 weeks ago, and there was no football then. So now when it starts again, everything starts again after the pandemic and everything happening right now, we'll have to see. Obviously, my priority right now is that. So if I have to escape football or whatever, I'll have to do it, because my priority right now is that for me. But obviously, yeah, I'll keep playing. I'll keep being fit, and when I have a chance and I'm here, I'll be playing football as well.
Just back to the darts, and we know we're going to see you and Justin in the World Cup in a few weeks' time. We're looking forward to seeing that. But what's the plans really for the rest of 2020? Are there any other events coming up before the year's out?
For me, I don't. Gibraltar, obviously, there's nothing left. There's nothing planned. I think everything's done. For the rankings, so everything's happening this year. We haven't done much. We played 4 number rankings, and then we had the 6 qualifiers for the World Cup, and the development 20 weeks. So not really, just the World Cup of darts for now, unless something pops up during these few months. But I don't have a clue, to be honest.
And lastly, but before we let you go, further down the line, we've seen Dyson go to Q School a few times. Could we see you perhaps doing that in the future? Would you like to pursue a career as a professional on the tour?
Yeah, of course. That's a plan. That's what everyone dreams about. Going to Q School, getting the tour card, and becoming a professional player for 2 years. It's what every dart player dreams about. Like I saw David Evans a few weeks ago saying it's a golden ticket. I think that's what it is. It's a right meaning for that. So hopefully maybe this year, if not the next, or whenever I'm ready and my management sees that, well, then we'll go give it a shot, and hopefully, like you said, be a professional player for the next 2 years, and hopefully more.
Fingers crossed for that. Well, thank you very much for your time, Craig. I do appreciate it, and congratulations again on qualifying for your first World Cup. And as I say, wish you all the best for yourself and Justin when it comes around in a few weeks' time.
Thanks so much for having me on. No worries.
Thanks again to Craig for joining us, and we'll finish up with some of your listener questions from Twitter. And the first one comes from Matt Johnson. With the strength in depth in darts now, will we see another player dominate in the way Taylor and MVG have in the past?
I think the answer has to be no, and I think what we've seen the last couple months now is exactly why that'll be the case. Because there are too many players now who, when they're on form, can average 105 consistently across a week. And that's what Michael Van Gerwen was doing pretty much all the time when he was at his best. And that's what Phil Taylor was doing starting around 2008, 2009, when he really hit his best, up through for the next 5-6 years. No one else could match that. Yeah, you could have a 105, and I can't say anyone, but almost anyone at that level can have a match where they average 105. But you really wouldn't see someone who could maintain that for a week. We're now seeing that Peter Wright can maintain that across an entire tournament. Devin Peterson can maintain that across an entire tournament. Michael Smith can maintain that across an entire tournament. Goran Price can. There are too many players that can do that. And the marginal difference between a 105 and a 110 average is not that much. So even if you get another 5 points added onto that and you're able to maintain that, you still have every chance to lose to someone who can do a 105. And that's, I think, the big difference. There are too many players who not just have matches that can match Phil Taylor and Michael Van Gerwen at their best, but have entire tournaments where they can. So I'm going to say no. No one will have a sustained run of dominance like that again.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And there was a lot of discussion over the weekend on social media and on the ITV broadcast. James Wade coming out with some perlers on his post-match interviews on ITV and saying that the new players coming through didn't bother him that much and the standard was better maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And okay, 5 or 6 years ago, we did have Michael Van Gerwen coming onto the scene, getting to number one and performing at some of the best darts that we've seen him play. Phil Taylor coming towards the end of his career, but still playing at a top level. Nowadays, though, the strength in depth is a lot better than it was in the past. There's players, and you just got to look at this past weekend and the European Tour over the last few weeks. We've seen players put in those 100 plus, 105 plus averages and go on and win the title, get some wins over the top players in the world. Jose de Sousa, Devon Peterson, Joe Cullen doing it again for a second time there. The standard is a lot bigger, and yeah, I personally hope that we don't see that era of dominance again from one player. It makes it a lot more exciting for the viewers and the followers of this game. I think, okay, maybe not for the player that wants to win all those titles week in, week out, but for us watching, makes it a lot more unpredictable, and that's one of the reasons why we like this game. You go into these tournaments, you try and predict who's going to win, and more often than not, you get it wrong, and that's why we love this game as well.
You're right. More often than not, I do get it wrong. Next question comes from a friend of the show, FDI. Who on current form should be in the World Cup but is not? And are there any countries that you think are unlucky to be left out?
Well, first part of that, we've got to say Peter Wright not in the Scotland team this weekend and Gary Anderson. But no, I think the teams are pretty fair. Maybe England, you'd look at it and go, Glenn Durrant just won the Premier League. James Wade, Nathan Aspinall just made finals on TV in the last couple of weeks. Maybe they're in better form than Michael Smith and Rob Cross. So if I was to look at a team, I'd look at them as maybe one that you could swap the players and think, yeah, that's probably a better side to put out there. And I know I gave him the kiss of death last week, Danny Noppert, saying he could be one to watch over the next few weeks. Well, Dirk van Dyvenberg had beaten him 6-0 in the first round, and he's a player that's just got to a major final, got to another quarter final at the weekend. As far as going on big runs on the TV in the PDC, maybe he could be a better partner for Michael Van Gerwen at this moment in time, but we'll see this weekend how those two get on. As far as countries unlucky to be left out, of course, Singapore not being able to travel, Harith not being able to get out of Singapore this weekend. It's a shame not to see them involved. Aside from that, I think we would have liked to have seen Portugal in the tournament before they got included. Me and Hannah spoke about it on the show a couple of weeks ago now, but good to see them get involved for the first time. Croatia, we've seen them in previous World Cups. Of course, Boris Krčmar, who's now on the tour, qualified for the World Championship at the end of the year. Maybe I think that could be the next team that we see get involved, but maybe France as one, but I'm clutching at the straws now. But I do think we'll see new teams come into it, but a lot of it, of course, does depend on if these players get on the tour, because that does improve their chances of getting that team in.
Yeah, you mentioned the players who missed out who I was going to mention. England team, I think you could make an argument that on current form, neither of them should be there, and that any of the three you mentioned, or even Joe Cullen, who just won a Euro Tour, are more deserving to be there right now. But it does go on rankings, and the PDC has been consistent about that for the last few years now. And you can't begrudge that Michael Smith and Rob Cross have earned their spot in that team. I don't have anyone else, though, to add for the individuals, but you did miss a country, and I'm a bit surprised because they were provisionally named into the field a couple of years ago before being taken out and have never officially made their debut, and involved someone that would have been on that team who's been a tour card holder for the last 4 or 5 years, now has made 2 Pro Tour finals, but still has not got to see his country at the World Cup, and that's Latvia with Matas Razma. When will Latvia be given their chance? Croatia, as you mentioned, they've had a chance before. France, they've had a chance before, even though they've never had a tour card holder, although they came close this year. Latvia have still not been in the field. And maybe they'll be feeling that they're a little hard done, and maybe this was the year Latvia should have finally, and Matas Razma especially, should have finally been invited.
Apologies to Matas, completely forgot about Latvia. Yeah, that they would definitely be on my list. And last question then comes from Dan Darts PPR. What are Burton's thoughts on the criteria used for the selection of the USA World Cup darts team? Which pairing would he prefer? And just a bit of background on this, of course, the Championship Darts Corporation, CDC, put on a 4-event American weekend in Indianapolis early in October, and the players that qualified, Darren Young did qualify, but pulled out of it, I think, or had to withdraw from it. So you've got Chuck Pulio in there and Danny Lauby as the two Americans representing you guys this weekend.
With everything going on right now, there was an ideal way to do it. And I think putting together some weekend where some players could actually get some competition after the first weekend got canceled right at the start of the outbreak and pretty much everything got canceled since then was the best way to go. That said, Indianapolis, it's Indianapolis. If you've never heard of it, it's because it's Indianapolis. But no, enough making fun of Indianapolis. I think it was fair. And in the end, you can't begrudge that this is a fairly good U.S. team. You have one of the best, if not the best, young and upcoming players in Danny Lauby Jr. And you have Chuck Pulio, who's been near the top of American and North American darts now for the last few years, and it's even qualified for the World Championship as a result. I think it's a fair way to determine it, and you end up with a good team even with Darren Young pulling out.
Yeah, I think one name I'd have chucked in there, Danny Baggish, who won 3 of the 4 events, I think, that weekend, but I'm not quite sure how they worked out the World Cup spots and the World Championship spots. I'd have thrown his name in there, but best of luck to the US quarterfinalists 2012. Hopefully they'll get a bit of revenge on Austria maybe this weekend, because that was who knocked them out last year.
Anything else for this week?
As always, got to say a big thank you to our guests for coming on the show. Thank you guys for listening. And as always, at the start of the month, we give a shout out to our Patreon people that support us on there in the Hang Tight Club. Andrew Dugan, really appreciate your support, and anyone who supports us on that in the Handicappers Nightmare Club, the Appreciation Minute Club as well. And if you want to get involved in that, patreon.com/weekly dartscast. And as well, I mentioned it at the top of the show, we've got a lot of darts coming up and not many days off either, so we'll have a chat between ourselves, and if you listeners want to let us know what you'd like to see from us, we'll try and keep to our regular schedule as best we can. But yeah, we'll see what we can do over the next few weeks.
Yes, indeed. Thanks to all of our Patreons, all of our sponsors, all of our listeners, all of our guests, all of our team as well. We don't thank Hannah nearly enough, as well as all of our other contributors. I hope you guys enjoy the World Cup. I hope everyone stays safe. I don't have anything else to say. I'm going to go back to being nervous like I've been all day because of everything going on in the U.S. right now. But hang tight. We'll be back next week.